They say the greatest battles are fought in silence. But what if I told you that the most dangerous war you'll ever face is not with an enemy on the battlefield, but with someone who claims to love you? A war of masks. A war of shadows. A war where the wounds don't bleed, yet leave scars so deep they change who you are forever. This is the story of the empath and the narcissist, a story of control, collapse, and awakening. And if you've ever felt drained, manipulated, or trapped in someone else's chaos, then you already know this war. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will not just explain their darkness, it may just reveal your own strength. They say, silence is the loudest scream. But what happens when the empath, the one who once bent, endured, and absorbed every strike, suddenly stops, not with an outburst, not with rage, but with a silence so unshakable, it feels like rebellion? This is where the true war begins. A war not of fists, but of masks. A battlefield where wounds are invisible, yet the damage is catastrophic. You see, the narcissist survives on reaction. Every word, every tear, every desperate attempt to explain fuels their sense of control. But imagine the empath stepping back, offering nothing. No explanations. No anger. Not even hatred, just silence. To the narcissist, this silence is unbearable. It is not peace, it is suffocation. Because in silence, their reflection cracks. Without your energy, their mask begins to slip. And here lies the paradox. The empath, once the perfect supply, now holds the greatest power by withdrawing the very thing the narcissist craves: attention. The game collapses when one player refuses to play. But let's pause for a moment. Silence is not weakness, it is strategy. It is the reclaiming of dignity in a war designed to strip you of it. Think of it like this. The narcissist builds a stage where they are the star. Every argument, every emotional outburst keeps the lights shining on them. But the moment the empath walks away, stage empty, spotlight gone, the performance dies. And suddenly, the narcissist is left alone, with themselves. That is their greatest fear. But this isn't just about winning a battle. It's about transformation. The empath's silence is not revenge. It is evolution. It is the quiet rebuilding of boundaries, identity, and sovereignty. The narcissist calls it betrayal. The empath calls it freedom. And in that silence, something begins to awaken. A strength the narcissist never imagined could exist. A rebellion so subtle, yet so final, it changes everything. So ask yourself, when the mask falls and the war of shadows begins, will your silence be your weapon? Or will you remain trapped in their performance? Because sometimes the loudest act of defiance is saying nothing at all. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The narcissist lives trapped in this prison. They wear what Jung called the persona, a carefully crafted mask of charm, power, or superiority. But behind that mask lies a fragment itself, stitched together by denial and fear. To the outside world, the narcissist shines. They appear untouchable. But deep within, they know the truth. The mask is fragile. And every time the empath stops playing the role of mirror, that fragile mask begins to crack. Jung believed the parts of ourselves we reject, the anger, the insecurity, the fear, become the shadow. The narcissist cannot face their shadow. They exile it, bury it, and project it onto others. And who becomes the perfect container for all that darkness? The empath. The empath often embodies what Jung described as the wounded healer. Drawn to brokenness, they absorb pain, not because they are weak, but because they sense its hidden meaning. They carry the shadows of others, hoping to transform them. But when the empath awakens, when they stop carrying the narcissist's shadow, the game shifts. The narcissist feels threatened, not because the empath is leaving, but because the empath is seeing through the persona. seeing the shadow the narcissist cannot bear to face. This is why silence enrages them, why distance terrifies them. Because in Jungian terms, the empath is no longer just a mirror, they become a judge, a witness to the very darkness the narcissist has spent a lifetime denying. Think about that for a moment. When you refuse to carry someone else's shadow, you force them to meet it themselves. You force them to meet it themselves. And for the narcissist, this confrontation feels like death. Jung's warning was clear. The shadow, if left unacknowledged, becomes destructive. For the narcissist, it devours their relationships. For the empath, it can either destroy or awaken a deeper power. And this awakening is what changes the story. Because when the empath finally stops carrying the narcissist's shadow, they begin to embrace their own light. Control is the oxygen of the narcissist. Take it away and watch how quickly the mask begins to suffocate. At first, their reaction seems predictable. Anger. Explosive rage meant to shock the empath back into submission. Doors slammed, words sharpened into knives, accusations hurled with surgical precision. It is not love speaking, it is panic. But when rage fails, denial arrives. Denial arrives. Suddenly, the narcissist acts as though nothing happened. They rewrite history, painting themselves as victim and savior in the same breath. It's not deception to them, it's survival. They must keep the illusion intact, no matter how absurd it becomes. And when denial crumbles, confusion takes over. No, the narcissist cannot fathom a world where the empath refuses to dance to their rhythm. It is like a king discovering his throne is made of sand. Jung once observed that neurosis is often the refusal to suffer legitimate pain. The narcissist embodies this perfectly. Instead of facing their own shadow, they demand that others suffer for them. And when the empath resists, the system collapses. Consider the story of patient N. On the surface, he was brilliant, successful, admired. But his power depended entirely on his partner's compliance. The moment she stopped apologizing for his cruelty, the moment she set quiet, unmovable boundaries, his world began to unravel. At first, he raged, nights of shouting, threats, slamming fists against walls. But she did not yield. Then came the pleading, promises of change, tears that felt real but evaporated the moment she softened. And finally, the collapse. He spiraled into paranoia, convinced the world had conspired against him. The more she pulled away, the more his mask slipped, until he stood exposed, not as a god, but as a frightened child trapped in an adult's body. This is the collapse of control. It is dramatic, chaotic, terrifying to witness, but it is also inevitable, because when power is built on illusion, it cannot survive reality. And here lies the tension. In the narcissist's collapse, the empath faces a choice: to rush back and soothe the storm, or to hold the line and let the collapse finish what it must. Because only in the ruins of false control can true freedom be born. When the empath withdraws, something extraordinary happens. The narcissist, now stripped of their stage, begins to unravel into one of four paths. Each path is a transformation, sometimes darker, sometimes fleetingly redemptive. But each reveals the archetype Jung warned us about, the shadow demanding to be seen. Let's walk through these transformations. The predator intensifies this, is the first and most dangerous. Deprived of control, the narcissist doubles down. Manipulation sharpens into a weapon. Promises, love-bombing, guilt, all deployed with surgical precision. And when those fail, threats and intimidation follow. Here we see the archetype of the predator, the shadow fully unleashed. The empath becomes prey in a psychological hunt. Every silence, every boundary is met with a strike designed to break them back into compliance. It feels suffocating, overwhelming. Yet beneath the surface, This intensity is desperation disguised as dominance. The predator knows its prey is escaping, and that fear drives the hunt. The victim mask when aggression fails, another mask appears, that of the martyr. Suddenly, the narcissist is no longer the tyrant, but the suffering saint. They paint themselves as misunderstood, abandoned, mistreated. They whisper, "After all I've done for you, this is how you repay me." This is the archetype of the victim, king cloaking tyranny in innocence. Their tears are not always false. They are fragments of a broken self seeking sympathy instead of accountability. The empath, wired to heal, feels the tug of compassion. But here lies the danger. Pity becomes the new chain. The empty shells of narcissists do not fight. They collapse. They collapse. The mask shatters, and beneath it is nothing, an abyss of despair. This is the nihilistic stage, where they spiral into isolation, substance abuse, or self-destructive behaviors. It is the archetype of the wounded child, the part of the psyche abandoned long ago. In this stage, the narcissist is terrifying, not because of aggression, but because of emptiness. Their collapse pulls like a black hole, drawing others into codependency to save them. For the empath, witnessing this collapse is haunting. It feels like watching a soul dissolve before your eyes. And yet, even here, transformation is possible. The awakening possibility rare, but not impossible. In moments of collapse, some narcissists catch a glimpse of their shadow. For the first time, they confront the truth. The mask was never real. The love they demanded was control. The love they demanded was control. The power they clung to was fear. This is the archetype of the seeker, the one who, in facing the ruins of their false self, asks, "Who am I without the mask?" But make no mistake, this awakening is not guaranteed. It requires brutal honesty, often guided by therapy, reflection, and the willingness to suffer legitimate pain. Jung warned that most will turn away because facing the shadow feels like death. Yet for a few, this death becomes rebirth. Think about these four paths: predator, victim, empty shell, seeker. Each is a mirror of the same truth. When control collapses, the narcissist must transform or disintegrate. And here is the deeper revelation. The empath cannot choose which path the narcissist takes. That choice belongs to the narcissist alone. The empath's role is not to guide their evolution, but to guard their own. Because in the end, the empath's silence and boundaries do more than break control. They hold up a mirror that either destroys or awakens. And what the narcissist sees in that mirror determines everything that follows. Here is the revelation most people do not want to hear. The narcissist rarely changes, not because they cannot, but because they will not. Control is not an accessory to their identity. It is their identity. It is their identity. Take it away, and they don't simply lose power, they lose themselves. And so, instead of confronting the shadow, they protect the mask at all costs. Carl Jung warned that the shadow, if left unintegrated, becomes destructive. For the narcissist, this is not theory. It is daily reality. Their survival instinct has twisted into pathology. What began as a defense against childhood wounds has hardened into a fortress of denial. Think about that. A fortress built not from stone, but from lies. Lies told to others, yes, but most importantly, lies told to the self. When the empath disengages, those lies crack. The narcissist is suddenly faced with a truth too unbearable to hold. I am not who I pretend to be. For most, this realization never leads to awakening. Instead, it ignites destruction. Some lash out violently, burning relationships to the ground. Others spiral inward, collapsing into addictions or cycles of self-sabotage. Each path different, but all rooted in the same terror. Without control, they are nothing. This is the dark revelation. The empath hopes, prays, bargains with the idea that love might heal them. That patience, endurance, or sacrifice will reach the hidden child inside, but more often than not, those sacrifices vanish into the void. The narcissist does not awaken, they consume. And yet, this truth is not meant to leave you hopeless. It is meant to free you. Because understanding the pathology releases you from the illusion of responsibility. You cannot fix what does not wish to be fixed. You cannot save someone who clings to their own chains. The shadow side of human psychology is brutal. Survival, when twisted, becomes domination. Fear, when denied, becomes tyranny. And for the narcissist, control is not just a habit, it is oxygen. Take that oxygen away, and most will choose destruction over rebirth. That is the truth, the dark revelation. And only by facing it can the empath finally walk into the light. For so long, the empath's life has been defined by reaction. Every word carefully chosen to calm storms. Every boundary bent to keep the peace. Every silence offered, not as defiance, but as survival. But when the empath finally stops playing the game, something begins to shift. At first, it feels like chaos. The silence that once protected now feels heavy. Guilt creeps in. Am I cruel? Am I abandoning them? Years of conditioning whisper that choosing yourself is betrayal. And in the distance, the narcissist unravels, raging, pleading, collapsing, each reaction pulling at the empath's heart like a hook. This is the most fragile stage, the turning point. And yet, in that silence, something extraordinary stirs. A strange kind of peace, subtle at first, like the stillness after a storm. The empath realizes that the world has not ended. The sky has not fallen. The narcissist may rage, but the empath still stands. This is liberation in its rawest form. Not loud, not triumphant, but quiet, steady. The first breath taken without permission. Consider the story of Elena, an empath who endured years of control. For every insult, she offered kindness. For every manipulation, forgiveness. But one day she stopped, not with fury, but with fury, but with silence. She no longer explained, no longer justified, no longer pleaded. At first, she shook with guilt, nights filled with doubt, questions clawing at her. What if he's right? What if I'm selfish? But slowly, she discovered something profound. The silence was not empty. It was full. Full of her own thoughts, her own voice, her own sovereignty. As the narcissist unraveled, Elena did not. She grew steadier, stronger. The confusion faded, and in its place rose a clarity she had never known. She was not responsible for someone else's shadow. She was only responsible for her own light. This is the empath's turning point. The moment when silence is no longer a shield, but a foundation. The moment when guilt transforms into freedom, and freedom into sovereignty. And once that shift happens, there is no going back. Because the empath has discovered something the narcissist never will. That true power is not control, but inner peace. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating shadow and light into a self that is no longer fragmented, no longer bound by illusions. For the empath, this is the higher path. It is the moment when the years of pain, confusion, and manipulation are not wasted, but transmuted. Like raw metal thrust into fire, the empath emerges not as a victim of the past, but as something sovereign. Think about it. The empath once carried the narcissist's shadow, mistaking servitude for love, chaos for intimacy. But when they disengage, when they hold silence not as submission but as choice, the cycle breaks. And in that breaking, something new can be born. This is the path of sovereign empathy. Sovereign empathy. What does it look like? First, boundaries. The empath learns that love without boundaries is not compassion. It is self-destruction. Sovereign empathy draws a sacred circle around the self, saying, "Oh, what is mine is mine. What is yours is yours." I will not bleed for shadows that are not mine to carry. Second, emotional regulation. No longer reacting to every provocation, the empath discovers mastery over their own nervous system. Rage, guilt, fear, once triggered by the narcissist's games, now become signals, not chains. Instead of drowning in emotions, the empath learns to ride their waves with clarity. Third, self-mastery. Sovereign empathy is not about hardening into stone. It is about softening with wisdom. The empath can still feel deeply, still love profoundly, but now that love flows from strength, not dependency. It is no longer fuel for another's mask, but nourishment for their own growth. Imagine an empath who once lost themselves in someone else's storm. Now they stand in the same storm, but rooted. The winds howl, the shadows scream, yet within them burns a steady flame that cannot be extinguished. Jung believed individuation was the ultimate human task. The reconciliation of opposites within us. For the empath, this means reclaiming what was stolen, their voice, their will, their sovereignty. It means looking at the shadow, not with fear, but with understanding, and in that understanding, turning wounds into wisdom. This is not merely survival, it is transformation. The empath does not just walk away from the narcissist, they walk toward themselves. And in doing so, they embody a truth the narcissist can never grasp. That real power is not domination. It is integration. It is wholeness. It is wholeness. It is the quiet strength of a soul that knows exactly who it is and no longer needs permission to exist. This is sovereign empathy, the final step on the path of individuation. And it is here that the empath becomes not a victim of the story, but the author of their own. The dance between narcissist and empath is not confined to bedrooms or therapy rooms. It is the same dance playing out across boardrooms, governments, families, and even cultures. Look closely. Everywhere we see masks, leaders projecting strength while hiding weakness, institutions feeding on compliance, entire systems built on control. The narcissist-empath dynamic is not a private pathology. It is a societal pattern. In families, it appears as the parent who demands loyalty instead of love, raising children to carry shadows that are not theirs. In workplaces, it thrives in bosses who rule through fear and manipulation, draining creativity to maintain authority. In politics, it becomes spectacle, charm, and charisma on the stage, while corruption hides behind the curtain. And like the empath, society plays along, out of fear, out of habit, out of hope that submission will preserve peace. But peace built on masks is not peace. It is silent suffocation. So here is the uncomfortable question. Are we not, as a culture, addicted to control, addicted to domination, to appearances, to the illusion of power? Do we not celebrate masks more than authenticity, victimhood, more than responsibility? Carl Jung warned that what we refuse to face within ourselves will manifest in the collective. The narcissist-empath dynamic is not just a relationship wound, it is humanity's wound. A mirror reflecting how far we have strayed from integration, from sovereignty, from truth. And yet, within this mirror lies possibility. Just as the empath awakens through silence and boundaries, so too can society awaken by refusing to feed illusions. By refusing to mistake control for leadership, performance for authenticity, and victimhood for virtue. The personal is the collective, and the shadow of the narcissist is the shadow of humanity itself. And until we face it, individually and together, we remain trapped in the same performance, endlessly applauding the mask, while the soul waits in silence. And so, we return to the question, where it all began. What happens when the empath simply refuses to play the game, not with fury, not with vengeance, but with silence? The narcissist unravels, the mask fractures, The control collapses. Yet the empath does not stand in the ruins to gloat or to punish. They simply walk away, quietly, sovereign, whole. This is the ending most never imagine. No dramatic confrontation. No final words to make them understand. Because the empath finally grasps the truth. Understanding was never possible. The narcissist could only ever see a reflection of themselves. But the empath has found something greater. A life no longer defined by reaction, but by choice. A heart that still feels deeply, but no longer bleeds for shadows. A mind that has learned that silence is not weakness, but power. This is the resolution. The empath, who once carried another's darkness, has laid it down. Not in bitterness, but in sovereignty. Not to destroy, but to be free. And here is the haunting beauty. When you refuse the game, you rewrite the story. You are no longer a character trapped in someone else's play. You become the author of your own. So ask yourself, where in your life are you still feeding the mask? Where are you still dancing to someone else's rhythm, mistaking control for love? And more importantly, when will you step into silence? Because in the end, the empath's greatest rebellion is not rage. It is not revenge. It is the refusal to participate, and from that refusal, sovereignty is born. If this spoke to you, share it. Reflect on it. Leave your voice in the comments, because your story may be the mirror someone else needs to finally awaken. The empath who refuses the game becomes something the narcissist never will. Whole, free, unbroken.